Hey guys, today I want to talk about 3 single-handed swords that I recently picked up secondhand. I'm going to start off by talking about the Deepeeka Deluxe Stage Combat Viking sword. We can just take a quick look at it here in its scabbard. And just remove it real quick here. So, starting off with the pros of this sword, as you can see, it definitely looks the part of a Viking sword. The blade is about the right shape, the hilt fittings are correct, and it's got a decent leather wrap there on the grip. The blade is very thick. The person who had this sword before me said that they were doing reenactment style fighting and basically reenactment costuming with this sword. You can definitely tell that it's done some reenactment because the blade has a lot of chips and dings on it. But on a positive note, it has taken a heavy amount of damage without breaking or having any sort of cracks or catastrophic failures of the blade. So that's always nice. The leather wrap grip appears to have a riser basically wrapped around it. It starts here, and then you can sort of see it wraps around the handle. That gives it an interesting look and kind of an interesting grip. I'm not sure if that's historical or not. It feels okay, and it looks okay. Sort of neutral on it. Another pro is the scabbard. It appears to be a traditional wood scabbard covered in leather. And it looks pretty nice. It comes with some buckles for hanging to a belt or a frog, whatever you're using. And those are basically what I consider the pros of this sword. Getting into the cons of this sword, and starting at the grip, this grip is 4.5 inches long from the pommel to the crossguard. And that's a bit long for a historical Viking sword. Viking sword grips tended to be between 3 inches and about 3.75 or 3 3/4 inches. Basically, if this were an accurate Viking sword, I would expect my hand to fit in here with the pommel basically coming right up to the bottom of my hand. And you can see there's about an inch long gap here. So I wasn't wild about that. Once again, I'm not sure about this riser being a historical design. It feels okay in the hand. To me, it looks a little off, and I'm just not sure about it, so it's right on the fence between being a pro and a con, that grip wrap. Probably the biggest con of this sword, though, is the blade. The blade has no distal taper. It may be hard to see on the camera here, but it is, I'm trying to wave it here so you can see, but it is equally as thick at the tip of the blade as it is at the crossguard. So this blade remains as thick and heavy all the way through. This makes handling it not very nice. You can feel the blade just wanting to drag down. I imagine that after a while of swinging this around, you would get very tired. Yeah, the balance and the weight on this are just not ideal. If this were a distally tapered blade and started thick at the crossguard and got gradually thinner towards the end, I imagine this would balance just much better in general. The blade is completely dull. The tip is rounded. There's no point there, so this is a fairly safe sword for reenactment. And this is going to be a fairly quick review, honestly. So going over the pros and cons again. For the pros, I see this as being a good sword for reenactment or costuming. If you were doing reenactment fighting, it would last quite a long time. It has a very thick blade, and it looks mostly the part. It does have, you know, a nice leather wrap grip, the fittings look good and everything. From the con side of this though, if you were trying to do any sort of experimental archaeology, or, you know, trying to actually do any HEMA sparring with this, I think you would be very, very disappointed. The grip is not historically length, so automatically any kind of technique you're trying to do from, I mean, there's no sources for Viking, sadly, but the swords we find are much smaller, hilted than this, so right away you're going to be gripping things a little incorrectly. Yeah, if you're trying to do any sort of HEMA sparring or actual, you know, reconstructive martial arts with this sword, I think you're going to be fairly disappointed because the weight is so off on this blade. It's so heavy, and it just doesn't feel like it should, really. And the grip length is off too. So from a historical standpoint and from a, you know, an actual recreation standpoint, it's just not a really great sword. It's very heavy. Yeah. No, I was when I purchased this, I mean, I did purchase it secondhand, so I don't have too many complaints for getting it secondhand. It's actually in great condition. And I knew it had been used for reenactments, and I actually intend to use this for either costuming or basically very, very loose reconstructive or experimental archaeology. So I may be swinging this a bit just, you know, to try out some techniques, but this isn't something that I'll be, you know, really looking to as a historical example or just a good example of a Viking sword in general. And this sword weighs in at, actually let me go over the stats real quick. So the overall length of this sword, whoops, hit my desk. The overall length of this sword is 37 3/4 inches. The blade itself is 30 5/8 inches. And the sword weighs about 3 pounds and 3.4 ounces. And that is heavy. I mean, that is 3 pounds and 3.4 ounces is heavier than almost all of the long swords on this wall right here. And that's pretty substantial. I mean, it's a weighty. You can tell that by, you know, by not having a distal taper on this blade, they've really added a ton of unnecessary weight to the sword, which is too bad. So that is the Deepeeka Deluxe Stage Combat Viking Sword. If you have any questions, please leave them below, and I'll answer you as quickly as I can. And thanks a lot for watching. Thanks again for watching. Please hit subscribe and check out some of these other videos.